The car turned in through the gates just past midnight, the gravel giving us away before the house came fully into view. Lamps burned along the lower floor, enough to show they expected us. The door stood open, the light from within falling out across the steps as we drew up before it. The staff were waiting just beyond, set to receive us, and I noted the small, repeated adjustments Grace made to her hair across from me. It was not unexpected that she would be full of nerves. What gave me pause was not her anxiety, but my own. I'd carried this moment forward in every detail, and yet as we came to it at last, I realized the possibility existed that something might fall short. It occurred to me I might have allowed too much to pass uncorrected. She'd conducted herself without fault among the men back in Hearthwick, where manners were expected but rarely understood, and where even a careless attempt at civility appeared something finer than it was. But that would not suffice here. This house would not overlook what others might, it would observe and remember. Once the driver brought the car to the steps, the footman moved in to open the doors, one to each side. The Earl and my father were already stepping away from the car as I came down on the opposite side and turned back towards Grace, holding out my hand for her. "Come, my darling." She stepped down from the car, and I moved her clear of it so the door could be shut behind us. I turned her with me then, bringing her around to face the house. Her hand came beneath my arm so I might lead her on, and I felt how cold it was, as though the composure she held didn't extend so far. "Grace," I said as we approached the door, "it is only your grandparents and my parents receiving us. You have faced worse company than this. Besides, they do not bite." She let out a small laugh, turning towards me as though she meant to answer it, and I met her with a slight lift of my eyebrow. "But I might, if you do not pull yourself together this instant." She smiled and leaned in against me, her head coming to rest on my shoulder. "I do so love you, Christy. Thank you for being here with me." More staff stood in the foyer than duty required at that time of night, though I'd expected no less. Some had been employed by the house since before Grace was born, and the rest came for no other reason than to greet her. Langsley stood nearest the door, fair-haired and put together beyond what the position of butler required, though nothing in him acknowledged it. He stepped forward as we entered and lifted an arm to take my coat. "Sir." I placed it in his care and drew Grace forward before him. "Lady Grace," I said, "this is Mr. Langsley." She tilted her head slightly, and I understood from that gesture alone what she gave him was real, not the polished smile she summoned whenever the occasion required it. "Yes," she said, "I remember. It is very good to see you again." He bowed his head in return, and I brought her on at once before she made anything further of it. The cook stood a little apart from the rest, thinner than I remembered her, her hair drawn back into a knot that allowed for no softness, and dressed with a care that suggested she'd prepared for this in her own way. By the time we came upon her, she had already lifted a handkerchief to her mouth, not to draw attention to herself, but to prevent it, though the effort did little to conceal the tears falling from her lashes. Grace reached for Miss Turner then, and took her hand, and for a moment she held it without care for who might see it or what might be said of it. Yes, it was a slight breach of etiquette that I would have smacked her fingers for in another lifetime, but given the circumstances of why she did so, I thought it better to pretend I hadn't noticed it. We went on, and Langsley moved ahead to open the drawing-room door. Grace's steps slowed beside me, and she slipped free of my arm as she turned back. The gesture was quick, her fingers lifting to her lips and away again before I might counsel her against it. I understood there were those in that house who'd never taken to me, and never would, no matter what I'd done or might yet do for them. And I knew well enough Grace would face no such challenges with them. Whatever affection she showed them would be returned to her 100 times over, and I had no reason to stand in the way of it. Princess Mary, in her best lace and pearls, attempted to rise when we stepped through the doorway, as though she would meet Grace properly if nothing else remained to her. The effort cost her more than she intended to show. I heard it in the breath she drew and saw it in the way her hand pressed against the arm of the chair to force herself up. Edmund spoke to her in her ear, urging her to sit, I imagine, though she didn't obey him, holding herself upright by will alone for as long as possible. It hadn't been so when I visited her the year before. The difference was obvious enough now, and it was not lost on me that we had not come a moment too soon. I looked to Grace to bring her on, but she had already seen it for herself, and what passed over her face then left no room for restraint. She let go of me and went to her grandmother, too quickly to be checked, just as Mary's strength gave out beneath her, and she sank back into the chair, the effort having taken more from her than she could sustain. Grace reached her in time, not so much to stop it, but as though she feared she might be too late, and went down beside her without a thought for anything beyond the moment. Her head rested in Mary's lap, and Mary's hands moved over her as though the years between them would be erased if she only held her closely enough. "There she is," Mary said between sips of air. "My sweet little Gracie." It was not the women before me who undid me, but the understanding of what made Grace cry that way, what had been taken from her, and all the years she should have had with her own mother, and never would. And now this, the only person left to her that might answer the loss, was already slipping from her as well. I became aware of my father at my side and glanced at him. He gave me a quick smile before leaning in just enough to be heard. "You have answered an old woman's prayers," he said. "The Earl is grateful for it." He left it there, and we both stood, watching them hold each other until my mother joined them. My father was not given to grand explanations, nor did I expect them of him, but I felt it all the same. "So am I," said. It required no great stretch of thought to understand how little time remained to them. Whatever must be done to see the matters of the house put to rest would be expected quickly, and not without reason. And beyond those things, there remained the public obligations that would follow Grace's return, matters already set in motion, and others that would be imposed without regard for readiness. It was more than people of their years should bear, and more than Grace should be made to answer for alone. I had no claim to the house, nor to the authority that governed it. That belonged to the man who stood within it and would pass in time where it was meant to pass. I had never doubted that, nor the part I would one day have in its keeping, but time had no patience for that now. What must be done would not wait for marriage, nor for heirs, nor for the comfort of doing things orderly. I knew what would be required to hold it steady, and what would follow if no one took it in hand before it was asked of them. So I set it in order in my own mind, how best to ease those matters from their care entirely, and how quietly it might be done.